One will tear, the other will maim. Whispering narratives. It began where no hunter dared to linger. The forest was wrong that night. Not just quiet, wrong. A silence that hummed inside the skull, thick and unnatural, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Above the treetops, a swollen blood moon bled through the pines, its glow painting the clearing in a lurid crimson haze. Two hunters stood in that light, rifles slack in their hands. They were not predators tonight. They were bait, though they did not yet know it. The first sound wasn't claws, it wasn't a howl, it was the deliberate crack of a twig, heavy, purposeful. The men froze, eyes cutting to the tree line. From the ridge to the east, something stepped forward, broad-shouldered, half wolf, half man, its ears sharp, its posture hunched, eyes glowing amber in the night, the Dogman. Its breath came in ragged bursts, each exhale clouding in the chill air, and from the opposite timberline, the second terror emerged. Its arrival was heralded by the sickening pop of bones cracking, tendons snapping like ropes pulled too tight. Fur erupted along a lengthening frame, its jaw distending, teeth sprouting into jagged ivory. The werewolf taller, leaner, its rage writ into every shudder of muscle as it forced itself into the shape of a curse. Both had caught the same scent, both demanded the same ground. The hunters never saw which monster moved first. Only a blur, fur exploding, claws arcing through moonlight, a guttural growl like metal tearing. The clearing detonated in violence, and the Dogman struck low, sweeping its arms like a beast that remembered the use of tools, battering the earth as it lunged. The werewolf vaulted high, a nightmare of sinew and fury, bones still snapping mid-leap. They collided mid-clearing, the impact cracking the night like thunder. Branches broke, soil churned. Every creature in the forest fled. The owls, the deer, the vermin, all of them scattering from the clash of nightmares. The hunters scrambled, rifles forgotten, diving beneath the twisted roots of a fallen oak. Their wide eyes gleamed in the blood moon's glare as they bore witness to something whispered in tavern tales. Denied by science, feared by the old tribes, werewolf versus Dogman, curse against Cryptid. And as the first blood sprayed across the leaves, fangs sinking deep, claws ripping fur from flesh, it became clear this was not a duel for dominance. It was war for survival. A war to decide which shadow would haunt the forest by dawn. Clearing had become a crucible of shadows, violence and blood mist. Every impact shook the soil. Every slash of claw left splinters in the air. Yet beneath the roar of monsters, the forest carried another sound. The wet, shallow gasps of the two hunters pressed into the roots of the fallen oak. They clung to each other, rifles useless, prayers stuck in their throats. One, younger, tried to steady his breath. The older pressed a trembling finger to his lips. Do not move. Do not speak. Because to draw the gaze of either beast was to be chosen, and neither wanted to know what being chosen meant. The Dogman's amber eyes flared through the smoke of churned soil. It moved differently than the werewolf. Less a curse, more a predator that had learned tools and forgotten none of them. Its hands curled like claws but swung like clubs, battering the wolf creature against the ground. The werewolf responded with raw fury, spine arched, muzzle dripping crimson, its howl cracking the night into jagged shards. The hunters felt it in their bones. That howl, it wasn't sound, it was a command. Bear witness, you cannot run, you cannot look away. The younger hunter's resolve cracked. He whispered, barely audible, "Which one's worse?" The older man didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the fight, but in them shone something more terrible than fear. Recognition, as if he had heard stories before whispered from his grandfather by firelight. Stories not just of one beast, but of two, competing, warring, both older than the towns and trails that scarred this land. The Dogman snarled, catching the werewolf's muzzle in its hands, forcing its jaws open, teeth snapping inches from its own throat. Blood sprayed, fur ripped, the soil darkened with ancient violence. The hunters realized something chilling. Neither fought for territory. Both fought to erase the other. one cursed by blood, the other born from wilderness itself, one bound to cycles of the moon, the other bound to nothing but hunger. The men's terror shifted from survival to knowledge. If one wins tonight, the woods will never be safe again. A branch snapped above them, not from the duel but from something else smaller, watching. Amber eyes, not the Dogman's, blinked from the branches above. For a moment, the younger hunter thought it was over, that a third horror had joined the fray. But the eyes vanished, retreating, as if the forest itself was crawling with witnesses to the war. The werewolf hurled the Dogman into a trunk, splinters raining down like wooden shrapnel. The Dogman rose, chest heaving, a guttural laugh tearing from its throat. A laugh, mocking, human in its cruelty. That sound drove cold needles into the hunter's ears. The werewolf's answering howl was not laughter. It was a promise. The hunters pressed deeper into their hiding place, every muscle vibrating with the need to run, every instinct warning that if they moved before dawn, they would be the next to bleed. The fight was only beginning. The fight tilted when the moon slid from a cloud and burned the clearing red. The werewolf's back bowed, then arched higher, as if the light itself hooked chains into its spine and pulled. Bone groaned, ribs widened, a fresh seam of fur tore through skin like grass through frost. The change wasn't finished. The change never is, not when the moon keeps calling. The Dogman felt the surge and met it head-on. It ducked under a raking swipe, shoulder-checked the wolf thing into a stump, then hammered down with both forearms like clubs. Splinters burst, the werewolf rolled, landed in a three-point crouch and launched, a slashing arc aimed to end legends. The Dogman caught the wrist, snarled, and drove a knee into the wolf's ribs. Something cracked. The forest flinched. Under the roots, the older hunter's lips moved. Not prayer, not courage, memory. It's real. He breathed, voice a rusted hinge. The red border war, my granddad said. Dogmen hunt where the curse spreads too far. The younger glanced up, eyes huge. To save us? The old man shook his head. To keep their world intact. The werewolf's eyes flashed with something like recognition. A human shard left in the blaze. It feinted left, tore right, and sank its teeth into the Dogman's trapezius. Blood sheeted. The Dogman howled with a fury that sounded almost betrayed, wrenched free, and raked its claws across the werewolf's snout. Stripping fur, carving three bright lines that steamed in the cold, they broke apart, circling, breath plumed. The ground between them was churned to black soup. Above, crows that should have slept gathered in the branches, silent as judges. The werewolf moved first, a blur, a scythe, driving the Dogman back step by thudding step until both crashed through a curtain of saplings and into a shallow creek. Water flashed moonlight, spray turned pink. Here, the sound changed. Every strike doubled, echoed by the slap of water. The hiss of mist turned to blood vapor. The younger hunter panicked. We can make it to the truck, now. He scrambled out from the roots and sprinted low. The older man grabbed air and missed. Don't! Too late. The Dogman's head snapped toward motion. Predator math. Movement means weakness. It lunged. The werewolf lunged faster. They hit the ground in a knot of limbs and fury between the boy and death, each trying to reach him by tearing through the other. The boy stumbled, fell, scrambled backward on palms and boots as claws shredded bark inches from his throat. The werewolf shoved the Dogman aside with a shoulder throw that looked sickeningly human in its efficiency, then planted itself over the boy with a warning snarl aimed at both enemies, the Dogman and the moon. For a beat, all three, beast, boy, froze in a tableau cut from nightmare. Then the Dogman charged again, mouth wide, teeth like quarry. Tools, and the frame shattered, the creek frothed, the forest roared. The hunters learned what happens when a transformation refuses to stop and a cryptid refuses to yield. The world around them becomes collateral. The werewolf's arms thickened, fingers splitting wider, claws lengthening to black knives. The sound of tendon stretching became a violin string, wound too tight and plucked until it screamed. The Dogman adapted. Its stance dropped. Center of gravity lower, power rising from hips through spine like a practiced fighter. Beast that remembered training, the younger hunter crawled backward, sobbing. The older finally moved. He rolled out, grabbed the boy's collar, and dragged him toward the oak again, step by agonizing step, never taking his eyes off the duel. "Don't look away," he said, voice dead calm now. "If you do, you won't know when it's already too late." In the creek, the werewolf roared and slammed the Dogman's head beneath the water. Bubbles churned, the Dogman's legs pistoned, kicked the wolf off, and both rose, dripping, steaming, shaking. Still alive, still wrong, still coming for each other. The moon leaned closer, the trees leaned back, and the night remembered every old story at once. The creek could not hold them. Violence overflowed its banks and spilled back into the trees, tearing a corridor through saplings toward the old logging road. The hunters, half dragged, half running, followed the only path that wasn't choked. Teeth. The Dogman broke left, flanking, using trunks as cover like a soldier. The werewolf crashed straight through, preferring momentum over tactics. The road appeared, a ribbon of pale dirt under the red moon. A single rusted sign punched with birdshot. No motorized access, now twisted as a claw snagged it mid-swing and sent it spinning. The young hunter stumbled. The Dogman pounced for the exposed throat, only to be shoulder-checked away by the werewolf in an impact that rang the sign like a bell. The sound tolled across the forest. Crows exploded into flight. Far away, another howl answered. Fainter, wrong in its rhythm, as if the echo came from stone. They ran. The older hunter pulled the boy down the road. Behind them, the duel became a chase. Dogman on the ridge to their right paralleling, werewolf behind, clearing trees like a storm through wheat. Every 20 yards, one would leap down to slam the other off course. Every time, the other would roll, recover, and keep coming. The hunters were the line both predators shadowed, the axis around which death orbited, the road bent around a granite outcrop. That's where the first shock anchor hit, the Dogman cut across the switchback and vanished. The werewolf moments later stopped, head high, nostrils wide, scenting. The older hunter dared a glance back. Nothing. And then the granite moved, a blur, a dark waterfall. The Dogman fell from the outcrop like a spear, both heels together, and kicked the werewolf square in the sternum. The crack was audible. The wolf flew backward into a rotted stump that exploded into dust. The forest swallowed the impact like a swallowed shout. The boy screamed. That was all it took. The Dogman's head whipped toward them. Considering hunger won, it bounded, 3 great leaps, intent on finishing the weak link. The older hunter didn't run. He shoved the boy behind him and raised the rifle he'd sworn wouldn't matter. Not him, he fired. A silvered round, more rumor than weapon, caught the Dogman high in the shoulder. It spun with a roar that sounded like a man in a bear's throat. The werewolf was on it in the next heartbeat. The road became a blade edge. The beasts slipped on gravel, seized each other, tumbled, rose, struck, again and again. The Dogman favored the shoulder now, one arm lower, movements more savage to compensate. The werewolf's chest wheezed where the double heel kick had caved. Cartilage. They were evening out in uglier ways. They fought into the outcrop's shadow. There, cut into the stone, the moon painted an old mark, a circle of hash lines and a vertical slash, the blood-split rune. The older hunter saw it and went cold. His grandfather's stories had started with that shape. Keep away from stones, the moon remembers, he'd said. They remember you back. The Dogman saw it too. It hesitated, snarled, and tried to drag the fight away from the mark. The werewolf didn't hesitate. It grabbed the Dogman by the scruff and threw it across the rune. The wind went out, not just from lungs, but from the road, the trees, the night. The rune drank sound for a heartbeat, a hush that felt like falling without a body. Then the world came back with teeth. The Dogman went berserk. It tore free of the werewolf's grip with a strength that frightened the night. Itself slammed the wolf into the stone and bit down on its shoulder until the crunch went through bone. The werewolf howled, a note so high it might have been human, raked across the Dogman's face and left 4 bright wet bars that steamed like brands. The men ran. No plan, just distance. Gravel hissed under boots. Behind them, the duel followed. But not as pursuit, more like gravity. Everything was falling toward a place the forest had chosen a long time ago. They crested the next rise. Below lay the old switchyard, rail lines gone to rust, a collapsed shack, a generator cage someone had welded decades back and abandoned, fences, angles, corners, a place where prey and hunters both get trapped. The older hunter swore, "We can't go through." The boy staggered, sobbing. Then where? A shape dropped into the road ahead. The Dogman, one eye swelling shut, smile too wide for a beast. Behind, the werewolf hit the gravel, skidding sparks. The switchyard waited, iron-boned and patient, and the night greedy counted down. The switchyard wasn't abandoned. It was curated by time. Rails sunk like old bones, a shack with its roof peeled back. And in the center, a concrete plinth veined with rust where a generator once sat humming. Moonlight found a symbol carved into that slab. The same vertical slash through a circle, lines around it like teeth. The blood-split rune again, cleaner here preserved. The monsters reached the fence at the same breath the hunters did. Wire rattled. The Dogman paced along it, testing for weakness, a prison yard ghost. The werewolf stalked parallel, never letting the distance widen. Their eyes slid to the slab in the switchyard's heart, and their expressions changed. The Dogman's lip curled. The werewolf's muzzle lifted as if sniffing an old scent. The boy whispered, "What is that?" The older man answered, "A pact mark." As if the words were a tooth he'd been trying not to touch with his tongue. He told it fast, breath ragged, as the beasts circled. Before there were towns, there were promises. The Blood Moon Pact carved boundaries so the curse wouldn't drown the world. Dogmen were wardens on the outside, culling where the moon spilled. Werewolves on the inside, bound to a bloodline code kept to their circles. He pointed with his chin at the slab. "This is a gate without a door, a counting place. Blood lands here." The forest remembers who owns the night. As if it had been listening, the werewolf moved first. It leapt the fence without touching it, landed on the rail, and padded toward the slab. The Dogman snarled, vaulted after, and shouldered the wolf. Away they circled the stone like priests who'd forgotten their liturgy. Each refusing to blink, the older hunter shoved the boy toward the collapsed shack, inside, under the belt line. "If they drag us out, we cut for the tree line when they lock again." The boy nodded, dizzy with fear, and crawled into the shack through. A hole where boards had rotted, out on the rails, the duel narrowed. No more charging, no blind fury. A pattern emerged, old as the mark. The Dogman tried to pull the fight off the slab. The werewolf kept angling on. Each strike wrote a sentence across skin. Each counter rewrote it in a different alphabet. Blood pattered onto concrete. The rune drank it and darkened. The night felt it. So did the crows, the wind, the stone. The world leaned in. The older hunter remembered another line from his grandfather. "If the mark drinks 3 times, the forest chooses." He looked at the slab. 1 stain smoked where it touched. 2. He counted blood with his breath. He prayed for a lie. The Dogman fainted high, ripped low and opened the werewolf's thigh. Blood sprayed a bright arc. They both slipped, and the 3rd drop struck the mark dead center. Silence, not the hush of fear, the hush of agreement. Every shadow edged sharper. The moon pulsed once, as if nodding. The rune exhaled a home breath fallen centuries out of time. The Dogman froze, head bowed despite rage. The werewolf's breathing slowed. Its eyes lost some of their furnace glow, revealing an ember of human grief inside. For one impossible beat, both monsters looked like penitents. The older hunter acted. He vaulted the fence and ran to the slab, boots skidding on old oil. Back. He shouted to no one and everyone and slammed the butt of his rifle onto the mark. It thudded, a dull, wrong sound, as if striking a grave. The dogman snapped out of the reverie first and charged. The werewolf intercepted, one palm to the dogman's. Chest, claws sheathing half a hair in restraint and pushed, not to wound, to bar. The dogman snarled, confused. The older man stared at the werewolf over the rune. The werewolf stared back, and in that stare was a question. Do you remember me? Do you remember us? Memory or myth, something bridged species for a heartbeat. The boy screamed from the shack. A third presence loomed in the doorway, eyes amber, body thin, too thin, fur patchy, teeth small but many. A whelp, not dogman, not werewolf, something born wrong on the border. It had watched from the trees. It had followed the blood to its altar. The dogman and werewolf reacted the same way. They moved to kill it. The older hunter leapt between, rifle wide like a shepherd's. "Crook, no!" he barked. "Not this one." The whelp whimpered, eyes flicking from giant to man. The dogman's ears went flat. The werewolf's nostrils flared. The runes smoked. The packed place had counted to 3. It would now judge what belonged. The judgment didn't arrive as lightning. It arrived as geometry. The switchyard's rails hummed a note no human throat could hold. The fences drew a square around the slab. The moon laid a perfect circle inside it. Where the circle crossed square, 4 bright intersections flared, north, south, east, west, like cardinal teeth. The whelp whimpered. The dogman lunged for it. The werewolf lunged for the dogman. The older hunter lunged for anything he could still save. The yard moved. The rails vibrated until every bolt sang. A pressure built in the chest, like breath held too long. The werewolf checked the dogman into a fence post that detonated flakes of rust. The dogman rebounded with a headbutt that split the wolf's brow and painted the rune new red. The whelp bolted from the shack, darting on all 4s toward the open yard. Straight for the circle, the older hunter dove, caught it around the ribs, and rolled. Tiny teeth grazed his forearm. He gasped, not from pain, but from a vision that wasn't his. A pine hallway, a woman crying, a door locked from the outside, the whelp's memory, not his, pouring like cold water through his bones. Easy. He whispered to a thing built to be anything but, "You're not their proof." The dogman tore free and came for man and whelp. The werewolf interposed again, legs braced, shoulders squared. A human stance, unmistakable. The dogman hesitated, and that hesitation opened a window. The werewolf hammered a hook into the dogman's jaw that spun its head like a bad dream, followed with a rake that opened its chest in a red T. The dogman fell to one knee. The intersections flared brighter, the square circle locked. The rune, fed, spoke. Without words, choose keeper or curse. One stays, one goes, not death. Banishment, the yard had become a mouth. It would swallow exactly one monster and spit the other back into the world. The dogman saw its end and laughed anyway, a wet, rattling thing. It grabbed the werewolf by the throat. "Go," that laugh seemed to say in a lost human shard. "Go back to your little circles. We'll keep the borders." It shoved the werewolf toward the circle's center. The werewolf planted its feet on pain, locked the dogman's wrists, and answered with a sound that might have once been a name. The whelp keened. The older hunter tightened his grip. The younger crawled from the shack, shaking, eyes glass bright. "Which," he started, and couldn't finish. There was no which. There was only what happens when choice pretends to be mercy. The dogman lifted. The werewolf lifted back. For a carved second, they were statues at the mouth of a ritual too old to disobey. Then the second shock anchor detonated. The generator cage, a rusted cube of welded bars, ripped from its bolts, danced in the air like an iron kite, and smashed down between them with a sound like a verdict. Sparks fountained. The circle line cracked. The square rang. The rule broke. The yard screamed through every piece of metal. The ritual collapsing didn't stop judgment. It made it personal. The choice slid off the rune and into the hearts of the things that bled here. The Dogman chose first. It lunged, not for the werewolf, not for the men, but for the whelp. End the era, restore the border. Simple math. The werewolf chose second. It didn't strike the Dogman. It seized the hunter and the whelp together and threw them clear. Out through a slice of fence the falling cage had torn open. They tumbled into weeds beyond the yard as the Dogman's claws raked the space they'd occupied a breath before. The werewolf took the blow meant for them. 4 trenches opened across its ribs. It staggered, dropped to a knee, and looked up at the moon as if asking an old, cruel friend for just one. More breath had got it. The werewolf rose inside pain like a man stands inside an oath, grabbed the Dogman by the scruff and belt, and heaved it across the broken circle, into the square's dead center. The yard remembered enough of the rule to answer. The Dogman's outline stuttered. The air around it turned to glass. The whelp howled, a thin, small siren, while the Dogman's eyes found the werewolf's and held there with something like respect and something like promise. Next time, that look said, "Aye." Switchyard's mouth closed. The Dogman vanished with a sound like a door locking under the ocean. Silence poured in, too thick to breathe. The moon dimmed a fraction. The rails cooled. The cage settled crooked. The older hunter let the whelp down, slow, and checked his arm. Blood, already dark, no bite mark deep enough to doom. Not tonight, maybe never. He would not check again under bright light. He would let ignorance be a mercy. The werewolf swayed. It had not been chosen to stay by the rune. It had chosen to stay by action. It turned its face toward the men and the whelp, one eye closing, the other amber-ringed, and waited for the moon's next command. It came as clouds drew like curtains, and the stage changed again. Dawn didn't come. It leaked. A grayness slipped between trees, washing red from the world. The switchyard looked smaller in the new light, the rune dull as old gum, the cage an ordinary pile of regret. That is the trick of the night. It makes meaning enormous. Morning shrinks it so your mind can carry it home. The werewolf stood in the yard, breaths deep and ragged, as though it were borrowing air one lungful at a time. Its wounds wept slow. The boy watched from the grass beyond the fence, hugging the whelp like a shivering dog. The whelp trembled, eyes darting, waiting for a verdict that never came. The older hunter rose, joints a chorus of gravel. He stepped to the fence and spoke with a care he hadn't used in years. "You remember me, don't you?" The werewolf tilted its head. Wind combed blood from its fur. The old man nodded to himself. "I thought so." He told the boy without looking away. "My granddad said the worst thing about curses is that sometimes they keep their promises." He meant this. The circle doesn't always devour the wolf. Sometimes it keeps a man alive inside it long enough to choose. The werewolf huffed, not approval, not denial, a sound like carry on. They moved as people do after catastrophe. Badly, the older man bound his arm with a torn shirt. The boy coaxed the whelp to drink from a dented canteen. Eventually, the werewolf limped to the edge of the fence and waited, as if asking permission from rules no one had written, to leave. The older hunter unlatched a section where the cage had torn it thin. "Go," he said, voice cracked but certain. Borders held, for now. The werewolf slipped through without brushing metal, an impossible grace for a thing built of knives. It paused in the road, looked up the line of trees where the Dogman had vanished from the world, and released a breath so heavy the grass bowed. "We won." The boy asked. "No," the old man said. "We bought time." They started back toward the ridge. The whelp followed on silent feet. At the tree line, the werewolf glanced over its shoulder. The boy swallowed and raised a hand. The wolf dipped its head once. A nod is a bridge, then melted into pines. The forest took it back like a secret. They walked in a morning that pretended nothing had happened. Birds tried a few notes, uncertain. Somewhere far off, a truck engine, a dog that didn't know what a dogman was, barked at a squirrel and felt brave. At the ridge, the old man stopped. He faced the boy and the whelp and the thin place where night still clung like spider web. He said 3 things the world would try to make him forget. Stories matter. Borders lie. Mercy costs. The boy nodded too hard, as boys do when the lesson is a mountain. The whelp pressed against his shin like any orphan with too many teeth. They would bury the rifle later. They would lie about the arm wound, about the sounds, about why the rusted cage had moved. They would fail to lie about the eyes. Eyes tell on you, so do scars. The old man had both. At the last switchback, he looked down at the yard. He couldn't help it. The rune, dull in daylight, flashed once, a fish belly under a wave, and was ordinary again. He didn't tell the boy. He didn't need to. The forest keeps its calendars without help. He put a hand on the kid's shoulder. When the moon fattens, lock the doors. Not because locks work, because rituals do. Behind them, somewhere no map keeps. The square that swallowed a dogman waited. Things that go away don't always go far. The mouth will open again. Promises keep themselves at the worst possible time. On the road, the old man finally allowed himself the smallest laugh. Soft, pained, grateful. Next time, he said to a sky that pretended it hadn't listened, maybe we bring fewer legends to a place built to remember them. The sky didn't answer. The trees did. They said, "You're already late." They went home anyway, and for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist. Linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.